Today, I'm delighted to be speaking with Parisian Edith de Belleville, who is a lawyer, author, and licensed tour guide. Passionate about French history, literature, and art, Edith tells us stories from the past in a way that inspires our lives as they unfold right now, and shares these insights both on her tours and in her writing. Her book, Belle et Rebelle, recounts the historical and fascinating lives of 5 Parisiennes: Christine de Pizan, Madame de Montespan, Josephine de Beauharnais, also known as Josephine Bonaparte, Georges Sand, and Sarah Bernard. The wit, audacity, perseverance, and rebellious nature of these women got them both into and out of trouble. From deciding to make the rules or break them, make history or fade into it, my conversation today with Edith explores the courage it takes to love, be loved, and not lose yourself in the process. Welcome, Edith, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks to welcome me.
It's always a pleasure to meet Parisians, especially those Parisians who can speak and articulate very well in English. So thank you for being part of our podcast. Edith de Belleville, tell us a little bit about young Edith.
Wow, how long do you have? Well, I was born in Paris, which only 12% of Parisians were born in Paris.
I didn't know that. 12% of Parisians
were born in Paris. Yes. So, and I grew up in the suburb of Paris. I have a sister. What do you want to know? I had a pet much later, whose name was Byron, like the writer. And you know the funny anecdote? My dog. I had my husband now I'm divorced, was a half Canadian. So my father-in-law was Canadian, English Canadian, like you, exactly like you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because when he was calling the dog, he was saying with as you would say, how do you say Byron? Because my English is
Byron.
Yes, the dog didn't react. I said, no, you have to say Byron, with the French accent.
And what kind of dog was Byron?
Byron was a half kind of Jack Russell and kind of a corgi, the dog of the Queen.
Do you remember what you wanted to be when you were a little girl?
I liked the women who were traveling, but it was not a job. So as soon as I could, at 17 years old, I did my first trip on my own. I went to Hungary.
You went to Hungary?
Not Hungary.
Yeah, you might have been hungry while going to Hungary, but
because it was communist when I went. Yes, it's a long time ago. I was a bit hungry in Hungary.
And how did you pick Hungary?
Because I went to see a Hungarian film festival, black and white. I was a bit snob, and I liked it so much. First, the language was very funny because I was not used to this language, which is when you're not used to Hungarian, it's funny. So I decided to go like this. I said, I want to go to Budapest. And I went on my own, alone, at 17 years old.
Fabulous. So your taste of, already there was the possibility of
adventure.
The belle. Oh, the adventure and the belle and rebelle in you.
Exactly. Yes. I traveled on my own until I got married.
You live in a particular area of Paris. Can you tell us about that and how your name is associated with it?
No, so I don't live in Belleville. People think I'm still, no, not at all. I live in south of Paris. I took Belleville because I was born in Belleville. So for people who don't know, Belleville is a working class neighborhood in the north of Paris. And it's where Edith Piaf was born. And what is funny that I lived my first years in Paris, I was exactly in front, Rue de Belleville, in front where you had the plaque where Edith Piaf was born.
And so was she an inspiration as well?
Yeah, yes. Well, I always ask my mother, did you do in purpose? She said no. Well, I don't believe her because she was inspiration. Well, when you hear me singing, clearly she was not a great inspiration. I'm not a great singer, but she was okay. Not my first inspiration, let's say.
And what is particular about Belleville that might be interesting for our listeners as an area to discover? First of all, what arrondissement is Belleville?
19 and 20s. Now it's more bourgeois than it used to be. It's interesting because, I'll say it's like a millefeuille, many layers. You had the Arabs because it's a district, it's a working class. immigration. So you had Arabs and you had the Jewish. Me, I'm Jewish. Then you had the Chinese. Now you have the Chinese, and now you have called the bourgeois bohemian, the bobos. Now it's changed, but it's a authentic district, interesting district. Not my favorite in Paris, I have to say, but interesting district.
And so you, as a student, you study to become a lawyer, but it's not your passion. Tell us about your passion.
My passion, yes, my passion is what is it? Do I have passion? Yes, a bit. Well, no, I like history. I always liked history, but I liked law. It was one of my passion, the law. I liked very much. It's very interesting. So I liked history, and so at 50 years old, I was giving tour. Well, no, I have to start from the beginning. As you're Canadian, you will be interested. So my husband is Canadian and French. So we wanted to move to Canada, to Toronto, because he has family. And I have family too, I have to say. So I couldn't be lawyer in Canada because it's not possible. And I didn't want to start again in English, plus in English, difficult. So I thought, what could I do? Fortunately, in Canada, 2 languages, French and English. So I decided to be French teacher to foreigners. So I had my license of French as a second language by distance in France. And I tried to find students. And to find students, I decided to give a free guided visit in the street because you're allowed to be guided in the street. So I found 0 students. Nobody was interested by my class.
Is this in Toronto or is this in Paris?
No, it was in Paris, So I tried to find students. Finally, we didn't move to Canada. But so I thought, okay, maybe I can use my license to give French class. So how to find students? So I organized free visit in English. And at the end, I was saying I'm a French teacher, blah, blah, blah. So 0 students. It didn't work at all. But people told me, you're a very good guide. You're very funny. So little by little, I was doing guided visit in the street. And I thought, that's my lawyer side. I say, okay, but I have to have the degree, the real degree to be a real tour guide. So at 50 years old, I went back at university and for 2 years, evening class, I had my class to get my license to be a licensed tour guide.
Oh, okay. And so these tours that you did on the streets, you were just talking about the history or the literature of the area or the architecture, the art of it, and then it turned into a museum visits?
No, museum I couldn't because you're not allowed to be tour guide if you don't have a license. You're not allowed to go in all heritage place, museum, Versailles, even Notre Dame. The law is very, I know the law. The law is strict. It's to protect heritage, that they want people to get a license from France, a French degree, a license.
And this is what the title is, Licence de Guide Conférencière.
Guide conférencière, yes. And what is interesting, that in my class, there were more foreigners than French. That was wonderful. It was a United Nations. People from all over the world, Vietnam, Brazil, Japan, Estonia, Russia, Ukrainian. But they all had a passion, Paris and French history and French culture. It was very moving to see all these people, foreigners who worshipped French culture, French literature. And it was I really learned a lot.
And you're a Parisian to begin with, so it surprised you a little bit to have this flood of people who are just wanting to know this love affair that so many of us have with this city.
Yes, I was very surprised. I knew Americans have love affair, but I didn't realize that even, people from Thailand, for example, Thailand or in Asia, it was incredible, the knowledge, the Russian. No, it was really even an Italian, so Italian culture is interesting. No, I was very moved. It was very moving to see these people.
And so you were studying, you're working as a lawyer by day and studying by night, and then putting together these tours and working with people, I guess, on weekends, or how did you coordinate the tours and your work as a lawyer?
I would say yes, I'm a lawyer in the week and guide in the weekend. But no, to be honest, I would like to be only guide and teacher because now I teach at university. So this is, if I could, 30 years being lawyer is enough. I mean, it's fun, especially when I go to police station. This is what I like. I have feeling to be in a movie, in a thriller, detective.
Well, so tell us, why are you being arrested, or are you going to save people, or?
Arrested, not already. No. When people are in custody, I'm on duty and I go as a lawyer. So this I like because I like thriller and detective movies. So this is what I like because I'm in the real life. You know what I mean? You see the bad things of society and everything. So this is what I like. And I like to talk with policemen, and it's very interesting. And I really respect police, I have to say. And lawyers too, but I mean, you see the real life in France. But I like also to art and culture and history, so I think it's a good balance.
Well, it's a fascinating balance, and you're seeing humanity at its worst and at its best.
Absolutely, yes.
I imagine when you're talking to people in a police station, you've become very good at discerning whether people are telling the truth or not.
Yes, I have a good intuition, I should say. Yes. Well, I'm used to people who lie, let's say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And they're not always the criminals, right?
No.
Well, with your licence de guide, you guide tourists and you create museum tours such as Fashion and Passion at the Louvre and Under the Skin of a Courtesan at the Musée d'Orsay. So let's talk about courtesans. What is a courtesan? It's a word that we all think we know, that we've read. Let's talk about, just go back to the beginning. What is a courtesan?
So the real word court, meaning people, you have two meanings. It's interesting. When you say courtesan for a man, it doesn't have the same meaning in French. Courtesan for a man, you have the idea of Versailles, the Louis XIV and the palace, people who are the courtesan, who have to please the king to receive, money and everything. But for a woman, it's interesting that it's not this. A courtesan for a woman, it's not a prostitute, but a woman who has clients in exchange of, I try to give a legal definition, like who gives sex in exchange of money, but she can choose a client, and she's refined, and she has an education. So you see, it's interesting to see a word in French, a courtisan, doesn't mean the same in masculine and in feminine. It's interesting about the French language.
And it's spelt the same way in both.
Yes, courtisan, you just put a E, so it's interesting. So courtisan is this, it's the ladies who were high, how do you say, high life, like not escort girl, but kind of escort girl.
Mm-hmm. But she's still getting paid for sex.
Absolutely.
Okay, so...
But she chooses the client, yes.
Okay, so is that the difference between a prostitute and a courtesan, is that they have a choice?
The choice, the knowledge, they are well, the education, they refine. I mean, I would say the courtesan I'm interested are the most, they have a taste, and, I was fascinated. I wanted to know, this is the way I always see things. This is why I wrote my book. How did they succeed? I'm always asking myself, what are the tools? How did they succeed? Even the courtesan, you learn many tips, how did they succeed? So it's interesting.
And were courtesans looked up to or looked down at by other women in society?
It depends which one. If you look the 17th century, the most famous is Ninon de l'Enclos. So she was admired even by Louis XIV. So she was really admired. And you really learn many things from her, by Ninon de l'Enclos. The courtesan, the golden age of courtesan in France, it's the Second Empire, meaning 19th century, beginning of the 19th century. And the end is the First World War, because after, it's more modern, it's the religion has less powerful. So, but the golden age is really the Second Empire. It's really fascinating, the luxuries they had. And what is interesting about courtesans, they inspired writers and painters. That's why it's interesting. Even music, but La Traviata, music.
Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. Well, in a way, I mean, in the 19th century, there's certainly there weren't many options for women, so there was this sense of having more freedom if you were a courtesan. But I think,
yes.
I think many of us or this idea that the moment that you're paid for sex must mean that in some way you're being diminished. But it wasn't really considered like that if we speak about the 19th century courtesans. Or is it a more romanticized idea of, she's a kept woman.
Yeah.
But the alternative, she's still a kept woman. She's kept anyway. She's kept in the 19th century. So under whose terms? Maybe she has more terms if she's the courtesan and having more choice than if she's just the wife and left at home.
Yes, absolutely. Because according to law, the wife had the same rights than the children of 6 years old. So you're right. You're absolutely right. Being a courtesan meaning to being a free woman, and they were businesswomen, and they were fashion icon.
Mm-hmm.
They were. Everybody wanted to have the same clothes than them. They were more than. It was more than sexual. It was, as you said, freedom. Absolutely.
And that she needed to be, well, not only beautiful, but educated or smart in some way. And in your book, Belle et Rebelle, there is one courtesan in particular that you give a whole chapter to, Sarah Bernhardt.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know her as, a renowned French actress as well. But tell us a little bit about Sarah. Because she resisted being a courtesan at the beginning. Her mother was a courtesan, and she didn't want to have if I remember correct, she didn't want to have anything to do with that. She thought she was going to go off and do something else. But then she had a change of heart. So tell us a little bit about Sarah.
Yes, Sarah, it's not only her mother, but her aunt. Both, they were courtesan. But the mother had as a client le Duc de Morny, who was the half-brother of Napoleon III, which is somebody important. Which is funny that Sarah, she couldn't be courtesan because she was too skinny. She was not curvaceous enough. So the Duc de Morny, who was the client of her mother, said, well, she could be actress of courtesan, it's the same. This time it was the same. It was not very different. So, and she didn't want to be courtesan, which is funny. She didn't want to be, but she has been, because she did need money. So all her life, as she always did need money all her life. If a man wanted her, he could have her if he could pay. She was playing comedy for only one man when she was a courtesan.
And describe her a little bit. She had this real joie de vivre. She had a wonderful sense of play and living in the moment.
Entertainment, yes. She was always making fun. That's maybe probably the key of her success. Is she was always like a children. She always wanted to make joke, to laugh. She was extremely entertainment. It was really a word to entertain people, and she didn't take anything seriously. This is sometimes I would like to be like her. To take everything just nothing important. Nothing is important. Just having fun.
And her life wasn't easy, but she said, and I'll quote, "Life begets life. Energy creates energy. And it is by spending oneself that one becomes rich."
Yes.
And I love that. The idea of being an actress, and she was an extremely good actress, and she was part of the Comédie Française, and had some physical challenges as well. Can you tell us about her physical challenges?
Yes, so I told you she was skinny. That I say in my book now, we would think she's perfect, but she was skinny. She was redhead. She didn't have a conventional beauty, as we say. And despite of this, that's why she's my model for this. Meaning, if you stay as you are, you think your defects can be your quality, And I think she had problem because her mother didn't love her. It explains many things. But what is interesting about Sarah Bernhardt, that all the things, and she was Jewish in a time where you had the Dreyfus affair. So she had many caricature about her because she was Jewish.
Yes, and the Dreyfus affair, she had played there was quite an interesting role. Will you tell us about that as well, please?
Yes, she was for Dreyfus. And her son, she worshipped her son, Maurice, but the only fight she had with her son, and she didn't see him for many years because of Dreyfus affair, because her son was against Dreyfus when she was for Dreyfus. So she was against the death penalty, so she was very brave. She assumed what she was, that's why I really admire her, even if she had many, many defects. But she was herself. It's important, especially in a world now, where you have everybody on Instagram to pretend you have a wonderful life, you're very gorgeous, all this. She was exactly the reverse. And despite this, she was successful.
And go back a little bit. You mentioned this idea of having a defect become your quality, and I thought that should have some more room and space around it. Can you elaborate more on that, please?
About the defects that become your quality? Yes, well, I had this because, of course, as everybody, I thought about myself first. I had this idea when I became a tour guide. I remember my English teacher, she said, it's interesting because you have American audience. She said, with American, there are rules. I didn't know there are rules with American. There are rules. You don't talk about sex. You don't have to wear heavy perfume. You don't have to smoke. You don't have to smell the cigarettes. So I thought, wow, so many rules for, I thought American.
These are all things that you're not allowed to do as a tour guide.
Exactly. With American, this is the secret rules. I tell you a secret, because any guide will tell you, of course, no, but this is that's the secret rules. With Anglo-Saxon, but American. Okay, so I thought, okay, what I do? No sex, no perfume. And I remember I had a Russian girlfriend, Alexandra. She was very funny. And when she heard this, she started laughing, and with a Russian accent, she said, "Oh, ma pauvre, tu ne vas jamais travailler avec les Américains, toi. Parce que tu parles fort, tu sens beaucoup le parfum." She was saying, I translate that, "Oh, my poor, you will have never American clients because I like to wear heavy perfume. I speak loudly. I say what I think, and I remember with the Russian friends, they were laughing. They say, "Oh, you couldn't tell this to Russian." So she told me this, and she couldn't stop laughing. I was not laughing at all,
You're seeing a very bleak future.
Yes, exactly. I say, okay, I'm going to work with who? Maybe with the French, but that's it. And even with the French. So I was in great panic. I said, okay, I won't be able to work with American. I don't want to, I could pretend, but I'm not like this. I said, no, I can't. So, and I was doing my researches about Sarah Bernard by the way, in French, we say Bernard, not Bernhard. So I was doing my researches with Sarah Bernard, and suddenly had you seen English, a déclic, clack, in my eureka, in my mind. I say, no, it's wrong. I mean, I'm sure American, they're like other people. I'm sure, of course, I don't tell my sex life. Well, I would have nothing to tell anyway. But of course, I'm a normal woman, but I don't don't censor myself. Mm-hmm. You say like this in English. And I say, no, it's stupid. I think even Americans, they want real people, if, you see the link. This is how I had the link with Sarah Bernard and my job, my work as a tour guide, to be yourself. And I would tell to everybody, be yourself, yourself.
Mm-hmm. Back to Sarah, because I find her such an inspiration about her leg.
Ah, yes. She never had a wood leg. People think she had a wood leg in wood. It's not true. She had a disease with the bones, and she had to cut because she didn't want. Sarah Bernard, she was, how do you say in English, when you have many gifts, when you are very talented.
Yeah, she was gifted.
Gifted, when you do everything you do it perfectly. I think she was like this. So she couldn't just stay still, not moving. She couldn't do this. So that's why she had this problem. So even it's awful. You would think she was depressed. Not at all. It was during the First World War. She said, young men don't have legs, and me, I'm an old woman now. She was around 70 years old, and she said, "No, I want to play." So she played even with a leg.
Well, they amputated one of her legs below the knees.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And she continued on. First of all, I can't imagine that was an easy operation to undergo in the 19th century, but then that didn't stop her.
No, it didn't stop her. It was the 20th century, beginning of 20th century. But anyway, it didn't stop. You know, a motto was quand même, quand même.
Quand même, okay.
But despite everything, I did it. And despite, meaning despite, you know, she had no networking. She was a comedian. She was a single mother. She was not married. Well, she was married, but later she was Jewish. Even if she felt herself Catholic. But anyway, for the society, the French society, during the Dreyfus affair, people saw her as Jewish. So you think she had not many qualities to succeed. And she was the first diva. Can you imagine she played in Australia, in America, everywhere, South America, in French? She didn't speak a word of English, nothing.
So did people just go and listen to her and watch and not understand? Or was it an educated public or?
No, not educated. She was in the far west. She wanted to discover America. She really liked American women. She said about the Bostonian woman, she said we should take them an example. They're more free than we are as the French women. You know, she really liked American. And no, not at all. She played for cowboys but the people wanted to see her because she was famous. She created the self-branding. She created the merchandising, you know, she created marketing. She created everything. So people wanted to see her because she was the woman to see. And she was playing with a voice, a body. So you didn't have, even if you couldn't understand the French, it was not very important just to see her.
That's a lot of energy coming out of one person.
Yes, she was. Yes.
She was born with a different name, and this is a common theme in your book with the women that you've chosen. Her name was Henriette Rosine, and her name changed as well. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, it's in fact, yes, her real name was not Sarah. She took Sarah because of a Jewish actress before her, 19th century, whose name was Rachel. Rachel was the first tragedy. She was playing Racine, Corneille. She was really, really, really a pop star before Sarah Bernhardt. And she was the model of Sarah Bernhardt, you know. So she took a Jewish name, Sarah, because reference to Rachel, the Jewish actress. So interesting, you know. Because at this time, that's the concept that I talk about in my book. In 19th century, so before Sarah Bernhardt and during Rachel time, it's the time of romantic people, and was fashionable. It was the beautiful Jewish woman. It's a concept of an exotic woman. It comes from a Walter Scott, who wrote, I never can tell in English,
Ivanhoe.
Yes, Ivanhoe. So it was a concept very positive in 19th century of the beautiful Jewish, and Rachel, the actress, took it. She took advantage of it. She became popular because of this. She was also very talented. And Sarah Bernhardt had the same idea.
Well, Sarah's career and her adventure and her courage is probably the reason that she was selected for one of your 5 women in Belle and Rebelle.
Yes, I had something for Anglophone. She inspired Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was the fan number 1, and he wrote Salome for her. She never played, but you see, even Oscar Wilde, somebody not somebody a bit important, Oscar Wilde in literature. So she even inspired Marcel Proust. She's a Berma, the actress in is a novel. So she inspired writers and many people.
Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. She was a muse for many, and an artist in her in her own right. And she also bumped into, shall we say, another one of your Belle and Rebelle, who was a bit older than she was, Georges Sand, and it didn't go too well.
No, it's a big disillusion. It's when you know famous people and you meet famous people and you realize and they're only human. Yeah, Georges Sand, for people who don't know her, she's very famous for her life because she was a free woman, smoking the cigars, and she had not the first divorce but separation. And she inspired, people don't know, she was really the modern European woman, and she inspired Charlotte Bronte. the English, just to tell you the influence she had. And Georges Sand met Sarah Bernard. Sarah Bernard was a young actress, and Sarah Bernard played a theater play from Georges Sand. You think, wow, three women who have, they worship both their son. Both sons have the same name, Maurice. Many things to say. Not at all, not at all. Georges Sand says she's a vulgar. She's like a prostitute, Georges Sand. And Georges Sand said, wow, she's old fashioned. She looks like a grandmother. And why does she smoke always? I was very disappointed. It's like, when James Joyce met Marcel Proust, it's exactly the same. They met in Paris. One was talking about his problem with his eyes, James Joyce, and Marcel Proust was talking about his problem with his stomach. Can you imagine the two best writers of 20th century? Yeah. So disappointing. Eh?
You sort of want them to get along and be best friends and then forge forward, combining their resources and talent. And so Georges Sand was not born with the same name either. Tell us about her name change.
Yes, her name. She took a name of a male writer, first because she wrote with one of her lovers. And at the end, she kept the name because when you're a woman, it was easier to have a male name. Always the same. How women were treated in France. I mean, I would say in the world, Western world, but in France, it was not great to be a woman. I told you, the same. They had the same right than the children of 6 years old. So she decided she wanted to have a life of a man. So wearing trousers when it was not authorized, she was smoking, and she took a name. Okay, she kept the name of a man, and this is how she became famous. It's interesting because Georges Sand is the example as you can reinvent yourself. Because Sarah Bernard, she took another name, but Georges Sand, it's even more. She did more because she changed everything. Aurore was a name, Dupin. And Georges Sand, she's well known as the name of a man. George, it's a George.
And the practical side of the clothes you mentioned in your book, and I hadn't really thought about it like that, was because it's just cheaper. You buy one pair of pants and you buy one shirt. And as a woman, you would need
shoes
and one pair of shoes, and she could move freely through Paris. And you mentioned that, in fact, in the 1800s, I'm going to read it with my abominable French accent, but it was illegal for women to wear men's clothes, that there was this law that toute femme désirant s'habiller en homme doit se présenter à la préfecture de police pour en obtenir l'autorisation, et que celle-ci ne peut être donnée qu'au vu d'un certificat d'un officier de santé.
Until 2013 in Paris. The law was still...
Until 2013.
Yes.
There's so many laws like that are just, they wouldn't necessarily be enforced, but they're still on the books. So that law says that it's illegal to dress as a man.
Only in 2 cases you could.
And so explain those 2 cases.
So if you ride a bicycle, so you have to bring your bicycle to show, or if you ride horses. So you don't have to bring the horse at the police station, but you have a certificate, something to prove.
And that it's linked, that it's only for health reasons that you're allowed to wear pants.
Yes, exactly. They say, yes. So you understand that fashion, that the clothes, where I say in my book, it was a jail. How can you run when you have a tight dress, and very light shoes, and that's because the goal is you stay at home, you take care of the kids. The private space is for women, the public space for men, only for men. You couldn't go at cafe, you couldn't even go at court. Can you imagine? You couldn't go at court. Many public space were not allowed for women. So that's why I say now we complain. We shouldn't complain so much, because when you see how women used to live in 19th century, I talk about France, but the Western world, we don't even just wearing a jeans. Each time I have a pants, I think about Georges Sand. And I say, well.
And when you're talking about the private space for women and the public space for men, there's very different voices that are used in both of those areas. I think it's Mary Beard who speaks about this way that we learn as women to speak in private is not the same as men who learn to speak in public spheres, and finding that voice and learning how to speak or knowing how to speak to command the attention is something that culturally have left us behind.
Of course, we learn a girl to be soft, to be sweet. We never tell boys you have to be sweet, don't speak too loud because you look like a crazy, Exactly, you're right. Even the voice, I agree with you, yes.
And so George believed not only in equal rights, not in only in lawmaking, but also in lovemaking. And she was quite forward in voicing that women should absolutely enjoy their sexuality and feel the freedom of expression that comes with knowing pleasure.
Yes, this is how she became famous. She became famous because she wrote a book talking about the feminine pleasure. Can you imagine? I mean, in the 19th century, it was a big scandal. She didn't understand. Because her first night when with her husband probably was a rape, and it was like this for all women. That's why it's interesting. The concept of honeymoon. Where does it come from? The honeymoon. It's because if you imagine you're 19th century, you know nothing about sex, you don't know what will happen, and you're very scared because, of course, you're a virgin, and of course, your husband is not a virgin, and he goes to brothel or have courtesan too. So the first night, it's a rape. So if you stay near your parents, what will you do the day after? You will go to see your parents, your mother, and you say, please, mommy, I want to go back home. I don't want to stay with this man. So the concept of honeymoon is you go away from your home. So it will take time, 1 week, to be used sexual relationship. That's why the honeymoon was created, to that the woman, the wife, she will be used to. As she will be away from her parents, she won't be able to come back.
Until she understands.
Exactly. That's what George Sand said. They say we raised women like if they were, she said it's probably because this happened to her. She was raped during her first night with her husband. Like all women, most women, I would say.
I'm thinking of the wedding trousseaux and the way the lingerie market industry still wraps all of that up as a much different experience than probably even today is experienced by many women. I mean, there's a lot more sexual freedom, but still this idea that you're being, sort of babe to slaughter. You're being dressed up to be given away. And that this idea of a honeymoon, voyage de noces, and the nuit de noces, that no other woman feels as if she can necessarily explain to the bride what's going to go on, but the best they can do is send you so far away that they won't hear you scream.
Yes, and you see, it's interesting because in English, you have the word honey, something sweet. In French, it's voyage de noces, nothing sweet, It doesn't sound very romantic in French.
George and Chopin knew each other very well. And in your book, you wrote that l'homme ressemble à une femme et la femme à un homme. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that relationship between George and Chopin?
Chopin was very feminine. I wouldn't say was gay because there's no proof, but he was extremely fragile physically, which is true. He was coughing, and so he was fragile physically. He was very refined, and George, she was very strong. She had it's important. She had a good health. She was walking. She was a strong woman, and she was wearing trousers. So the first time they saw each other, she liked him. He was a genius. He was playing piano. She said, well, he's a genius. But when he saw her, he said, well, what is this woman? She looks like a man. So she was smart because at the second time, when she wanted a man, she had a man. Huh? She knew what she wanted. She was a bit bossy. And the second time she saw Chopin, she wore a dress. She was very feminine and everything to seduce him. So it's true. They were exactly the yin and the yang. I say yin and yang. It's exactly she did protect him. And it's true that the best music composed, it was when he was with George Sand, because she really did take care about him, that he could create in peace. That's why he knew that she would take care about him. So that's why he wanted to be with her. They had a mutual interest between them.
And George says life resembles a novel more often than novels resemble life. And I wanted to know, how does your life resemble a novel in relation to Belle and Rebelle? How rebellious are you?
It's a good question. Well, I guess I do what I can, as I always say. Yes, that's why it's interesting, because I can introduce my second book. This is what I tell, that I try. I live and I have, I'm like, I say, I'm like Joan of Arc, and I talk with this woman, who talk to me, who tell me, do this, don't do this. And, as I like history and the past, and I'm very dreamy, I live in my old world. So I have the feeling, I try to see my life through literature, through art, through the poetical things. It's lighter, when you see your life, when you have a reference to historical character. I just give you an example. It's when my children, they were smaller. One, he had the flu and he was complaining, he was coughing, and I said, don't complain. If you were in 17th century, and my son say, yeah, I know, mommy, I would be dead. Okay, so this is the thing I try to see. Always think about how it was before, so you don't complain, because we complain, me including. I complain a lot. So I try to, how do you say in English, relativiser, to say, okay, but if you know what happened before, we wouldn't complain. So it gives you strength. This is how I try. That's why I would say I see my life through history and through literature, to have always something poetical.
Well, that's a common thread. You write your story parallel in Belle and Rebelle as you're introducing the reader to these different women who've influenced your life. But there's usually at the beginning of every chapter a continuation of just some aspect of your life that gives you the perspective from which perhaps to understand one of these women's.
That's the thing new of my book, that nobody did it before me, I think. Maybe one woman, but I didn't know her. She didn't know me. Yes. What is interesting? Okay. We know the life of this woman. It's wonderful, but we always say, yes. And what else? I mean, they have a wonderful life. What interests me is how to use it now, the tools. It's like coaching. This is called coaching by history, that I didn't know it exists, but obviously this is what I did. So the second part of each chapter is how I used, or how, because I'm not all the 5 women, I would like to be, but I'm not. So I have friends. I have a friend who looks like Georges Sand, for example, because she married a younger man. So I ask her, how did you do exactly? So that's why I think I couldn't say the interest of my book, because it wouldn't be very humble, but that's why I think it's interesting when you learn history or biography, is how I can use it for me, for my own life. I say, if I was a man, maybe I would write how to be successful like Napoleon. Well, not always successful, but you know what I mean. As coaching, using this woman as coach for women of now, of the 21st century.
Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. Well, it's the juxtaposition of these lives. And if we go back to the example of a courtesan and I relate it to today's world where we're even, again, what's that difference between a prostitute, a courtesan, or a royal mistress? Women can be quite judgmental with each other. But if we had the same petticoats, what would we be doing in their place? And what choices you have in front of you and how you make those choices in relationship to you. And I've often thought about what I would do if I was a prostitute. And I think what bothers me the most is the idea that there'd be a pimp. If there's a choice to do something with my body and I decide to do that, then I just thought, well, all the money should come to me. But the moment there is a layering of other people making money, then it becomes a very old patriarchal kind of scenario. But I guess a long-winded way of saying is just this idea that judgment doesn't necessarily come from other sexes towards us. We do it even now with young girls, and if somebody's too easy or sleeps around, those kind of words and sentences are very hurtful, and we don't really know what we would do in the same scenario, and we also really don't know the truth. So this idea that you've created these perspective of what would you do well, what's going on right now in the 21st century? And then what would you do if you were Sarah, if you were George, or Christine de Pisson? What choices would you have made? So I liked following your story along. And some of them were, they weren't big dramas in your life. You were just talking about sort of everyday scenarios in Paris.
Yes, I don't like drama.
Yeah, they were just sort of, this is going on. And then it's like you stopped for a moment and thought, well, what would so-and-so have done? And then you go on and tell her story. So as a lawyer, you're taught to follow rules. And yet in your spare time, you're writing about rebels.
It's interesting, yes.
Have your rules, your notion of rules changed since writing about rebels?
Yes, now I stole money. No, not at all. I mean, I'm very a scary woman, I'm not brave, in fact, That's why I travel, because I was not brave. That's my therapy.
Oh, you're fearful.
You're a fearful exactly.
Woman. Mm-hmm.
I'm fear for everything, I'm not very brave at all. I'm not brave at all. No, I'm exactly the reverse. Mm-hmm. I'm scared of everything. So that's why I need this woman to help me, to say, they did it, you can do it, even if you're not perfect, if you scare everything, if your English is not wonderful, you can do it. That's why it's motivation.
Well, let's talk about language, because many of us listening live in Paris, and we certainly are very familiar with being the foreigner and being the other and not feeling understood. How did you learn to speak English so well?
In traveling in Asia, because I used to travel on my own. Mm-hmm. And in Asia, if you don't speak English, you cannot survive. So from time to time, I have an Indian accent when I speak English. I can imitate. So, and I traveled for 1 week with Australian women. And the problem of the French, we learn language if we have to pass a thesis in English. It's very, if you don't speak perfectly English, we're scared, we're shy, we don't want to speak. But as I was on my own in Asia, I didn't have the choice. I had to speak English, even if my English was not wonderful. Boyfriends mm-hmm. help too. I took always Anglophone boyfriends, so I learned on pillow too. I have to say, it's better. But when you have to, it's like, you speak. What is important in I would say this for the people who learn French or any foreign languages, what is important is to communicate. And your accent is not important, keep your accent. I would say keep your accent, because it's unique. Don't try to have, I'm always disappointed. I remember I met once an American. She spoke French and I told her, I'm so sad, I'm so disappointed. She said, why? I said, because you have no accent when you speak French. That's why, you think your weakness is your way to speak French. And I say, no, it's the reverse. It's charming. I understood everything when you have read my book, by the way. So it's your strength, it's your personality. Keep your accent. I mean, okay, people have to understand you, but I mean, don't try too hard.
No, you're right. And that echoes what you said earlier about staying true to you, that the default becomes your quality, and then just changing that perspective is just that. It's changing the perspective. It's not changing the accent. And then suddenly you feel completely different about it. So Christian Dior said, real elegance is everywhere, especially in the things that don't show. So talking about lingerie, what is your relationship with lingerie?
None.
None? No relationship? No, nothing?
No. Well, no, I'm joking. It's funny because as I knew I would do this interview with you, I was at cafe because I spent all my life in cafe terrace. I was watching two women and I was watching the bras they had and I was making comment and everything because of you, I was watching the breast of women. I said, oh my God, if somebody watched me say, I'm obsessed because I wanted to see the bra and things like this. So my relationship with lingerie, no, I'm exaggerating. For me, it has to be pratique. I mean, it's something...
it has to be practical. Mm-hmm.
Practical. And I would say it depends... no, it's important to have a nice one. I say this, but it's true that it's the same with the clothes. I mean, I don't have to be honest, I'm not And why do you say lingerie in English? This is why you don't say underwear. It's me who asked the question.
Right. Well, because we in English do say underwear, and lingerie is a very hard word for us to come up. It's sort of something that is not for now. It's for a special occasion. It's for something. It's not accessible. It requires a lot of preparation and beauty. And in fact, I say in my book that, French women talk about lingerie and we talk about our underwear.
So I'm more American.
Yeah.
I think,
okay.
You know what? I think even if I have a Welsh accent, as I say, I think I'm American inside because I don't talk about it.
I have Edith in front of me, so I'm looking at you on screen, and you were about to say that you don't, with a sort of a fashion sense, but you have an extraordinary fashion sense. You have a beautiful polka dot dress on and a matching scarf in your hair, and I've seen you in Paris, and your pearls, which I asked you to take off because of noise, but otherwise you're extremely fashionable. So it's interesting that you don't necessarily identify with that. So let's back up a little bit. We're going to figure this out. Tell us about your first bra. What does that evoke?
Say yes, something I was not at ease, It's
Okay.
it's something, yes. Yes, and especially, when I travel on my own, I told you, and as a woman alone, it's sometimes better to hide, than to show. That's why something I did a lot when I was traveling. It's something, you inside, even if it's not positive to say this, but it's true.
You mean to hide to hide your breasts?
Yeah, the breast, yes,
the breast,
yes.
not to show off your chest. Okay.
Yes, it was something in Asia when I was traveling, or in South America, the same.
Yeah. And as a teenager, were you early to develop or later?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay.
No.
So it wasn't something that was a marked moment of your of growing up.
The period, of course, the period is important, but which age? I really, I'm too old. I don't remember. Sorry.
That doesn't mean anything. It's just you don't remember, but it wasn't a marked moment. I remember I was the first one in my class to develop. So when you're the first or you're the last, you usually tend to remember. In my experience, being the tallest, being the one with the breasts, and being the one to have the period first is never the fun one to be.
Yes, you were the leader.
Yeah. And then I've spoken to women who are the last, and they're like, that's not fun to be last either when everybody else has got something that you don't. So no, it was just sort of curious. As a French woman, is there any help you can give us with this myth about being matched or mismatched wearing lingerie, parier or dépareillé?
It's interesting as a French woman. You know what I would say? It's interesting. You know what? I'm more interested about the myth of Parisienne than knowing if you have to have the same underwear and not the same underwear. I would say do what people want you. I'm very laissez-faire. If you like dépareillé, why not after all? But it's true, I would say no, same color, it's nicer, I would say. And it's even when you go in the washing machine, it's more useful if you have the same color.
If you could time travel, which century and which belle or rebelle would you most like to have a drink with?
Oh, Roaring Twenties. I like the Roaring Twenties,
Okay.
I like Hemingway very much. And I would be, but not the end, but I would like to have a drink with Kiki de Montparnasse.
Okay, tell us about Kiki de Montparnasse.
So she was the muse of an artist in Roaring Twenties. She was the girlfriend of Man Ray, an American photographer who did belong to the Surrealist movement. She's Hemingway wrote the preface of only two people. One was a bartender, an American, Jimmy Charter, I think, and the second is Kiki de Montparnasse. That's it. He never wrote preface to anyone, Hemingway. So you mean he said she's really more than a queen. She's really the queen of Montparnasse. So she was a funny, and she was taking cocaine like many, but she was funny and she was very nice, sweet, and muse of all the modern artists from Paris.
So you'd have a drink with her.
Oh, yes, I'm sure she was singing. And she didn't wear underwear. I have to tell you a story. Nobody's interested, but you will be. Kiki de Montparnasse never wore underwear. culotte. How do you say in English?
Panties.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Panties.
underwear or
never,
panties.
never,
Mm-hmm.
never. And she liked to dance French cancan. So you can imagine. So a best friend, Tress, told her you should wear. So she wore. And what is crazy, when you type Kiki de Montparnasse, this is a brand, luxury brand of underwear from New York.
And sophisticated, very chic, sophisticated, erotic brand. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Kiki de Montparnasse. Now, this is it. I sent them a mail. I did insult them. They never answered to me. I said, how dare you to use Kiki de Montparnasse, my Kiki de Montparnasse? She never wore panties, and to use it as marketing? Shame on you. I was not happy. I was not very nice with them. So you see this. Still a link with lingerie.
Yeah. Or not. There's
Or
no,
not.
yeah, it's missing the link. Paris Undressed will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Paris Undressed. What's next in your projects? You were talking about a book. Can you tell us about what that book's about and what stage it's at?
Yes, so I finished to write. I asked my friend Lisa Anselmo to rewrite because, as you can hear, my English is far from to be perfect. And
so you've written it in English.
Yes.
Okay.
I like the challenge, and I wrote in English. So it's very basic, meaning if you're not Anglophone, you will understand everything. It's not Shakespeare or Jane Austen, and I will self-publish. So in few months, it should be available. It's about kind of memoir. Well, in French, when you say memoir, it means you're 80 years old. So that's why I don't like too much this word, but it's kind of memoir. It's more my life as a Parisian woman in Paris. Voilà. And I talk about history, literature, and the myth of the Parisian woman.
Okay. And what's the title? Do you have a working title?
Yes. It's the name of my Facebook group. I make advertisement because I have a Facebook group in Facebook. It's La Vie Parisienne. It will be the title. La Vie Parisienne.
Right. Okay.
Parisian
so it's called
life.
La Vie Parisienne and it's written in English, and we can look forward to that coming out in the months to come.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Edith, it's been just wonderful speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. And thank you to Jennifer.
To learn more about Edith, her tours, and her writing, visit her website, edithdebelleville.com. That's spelled EDITHDEBELLEVILLE.com. And follow her on Instagram at Edith_de_Belleville. That's spelled EDITH_DE_BELLEVILLE. Thank you for listening to Paris Undressed. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share and subscribe so we can continue to connect our stories one bra at a time. Paris Undressed is produced by Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please go to parisundergroundradio.com. Merci et à la prochaine.